When therefore you shall see the abomination of desolation, as spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let him who reads understand. Welcome to Revelation Unraveled. I'm your host, William Tapley, also known as the third eagle of the apocalypse and the co-prophet of the end times. This is part 2 in my series on the amazing prophecies of Daniel about the abomination of desolation. And as we discovered in part 1, there are actually 4 abominations, and they affect each of the 4 groups who will reign with Jesus during the millennium: the raptured Protestants, the protected Catholics, the holy martyrs, and the converted Jews. And we found in part 1 that chapters 10 and 12 of Daniel are actually one chapter. And those 34 verses must be divided into 2 17-verse sections. And section 1 is arranged normally, that is, verses 1 through 17 of chapter 10. And they correspond to the rest of the verses in chapter 10 and all the verses in chapter 12, except that those verses are the reverse. And they correspond with each other. And they help to explain some of the most important parts of these 2 chapters. And these 2 chapters refer to the abomination of desolation as they affect Catholics. With the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI, Daniel's prophecy of this particular abomination of desolation, that is, the false prophet taking over the Catholic Church, is about to be fulfilled. We also find this in Revelation 13, where the false prophet and the Antichrist are revealed. Will Revelation 13 be fulfilled in 2013? And sometimes the dates of current events are reflected in Bible prophecy. For example, Pope Benedict resigned on 2/11. This points to Revelation 11:2, where the holy city is trodden underfoot for 42 months. Now that holy city in the end times refers to Rome. Incidentally, 211 is also the emergency phone number in Europe, corresponding to 9/11 here in the United States. And now let's look at 3 more privileged groups in addition to the remnant Catholics. First, let's take a look at where these 4 groups who will reign with Jesus during the millennium are found in Daniel chapter number 12. And the first group refers to the raptured Protestants in verse number 3 of chapter 12. But they that are learned. Now this refers to Protestants, and if you go on YouTube, you will find hundreds, perhaps thousands, of very informative videos about the Bible, mostly by Protestants. And I think this is a fair description of Protestants. They are more interested in studying the Bible than Catholics. They shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that instruct many to justice as stars for all eternity. And of course, a remnant of Protestants will be raptured. It is promised to them. And in verse number 2, we find the holy martyrs. And many of those that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some unto life everlasting, and others unto reproach to see it always. Now, not all martyrs will join with Jesus during the millennium, but certainly those who are martyred by the Antichrist will live to see the 1,000 years of peace. And in verse number 1, we see a third group, and those are the converted Jews. But at that time shall Michael rise up, the great prince, who stands for the children of thy people. Now this refers to the Jews because thy people would be Daniel's people. And of course, Daniel was Jewish. And a time shall come such as never was from the time that nations began until that time. That, of course, is the end times, the times we are living in today. And at that time shall thy people, that is Daniel's people, be saved. But not all the Jews will be saved, everyone that shall be found written in the book of life. Now, if we look at verse number 13, which is the corresponding verse from chapter 10, we find referenced the king of the Persians. Now, Josephus says that this refers to the Antichrist, and he may be right, That would correspond with Isaiah, who calls the Antichrist the Assyrian. However, if this is the Antichrist, it's the only reference to him in this chapter 10/12, because this is primarily about the arrival of the false prophet. Now, I won't review where the protected Catholics are found in chapters 10 and 12 of Daniel, because I did that in part 1, and you can find them in verses 7 of each of those 2 chapters. Now, this chiasmus, which Daniel set up, was undoubtedly to respond to the angel who tells him to seal up his prophecies. In other words, this hidden secret can be discovered when these chapters are put side by side. The verses explain each other. And the most important explanation is found in verse 11 of chapter 12 and verse 3 of chapter 10. Because in those verses we find out exactly what the abomination refers to, and exactly what the sacrifice which is taken away from the prince refers to. And from the time when the continual sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination unto desolation shall be set up, there shall be 1290 days. Now, what is this continual sacrifice referred to? To find out, we look over here in verse number 3, where Daniel says, I ate no desirable bread. The desirable bread is the Holy Eucharist. And neither flesh nor wine entered into my mouth. This undoubtedly refers to the body and blood of Christ, as found in the Eucharist. So now we know what the continual sacrifice refers to. And the abomination unto desolation is found here, where Daniel says, neither was I anointed with anointment. Now the one who is anointed refers to the Pope. And consequently, the abomination of desolation is a person. It will be the false prophet who is not truly anointed. Now, I received quite a few interesting comments on part number 1 of this series, so keep those comments coming. In fact, one of my subscribers pointed out to me that the desirable bread was actually the Holy Eucharist. I had not seen that, so thank you very much. However, this particular message is not the most important one when we unseal chapters 10 and 12 of Daniel. Daniel does not leave us orphans, so to speak. He provides a solution to the problem. The problem of the Antichrist, the problem of the abomination of desolation, the problem of the sacrifice being taken away from the prince, the problem of the false prophet. And that solution is the same solution I have been telling you people all along. And that solution is Mary's rosary. And when we read all of the abominations of desolation, as found in chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, we will find that Daniel is giving us the exact same solution. Let's take a closer look. Most of the verses in Daniel's chiasmus are not related to each other. I have printed those in black. The ones which are related I've printed in red, like verses 7 of chapter 12 is related to verse 7 of chapter 10. Verse 1 of chapter 12 is related to verse 13 of chapter 10. Now, these related verses form lines of demarcation in the overall pattern. In other words, verse number 7 of chapter 12 is followed by verse 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. And verse 7 of chapter 10 is followed by verses 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Notice they total 6 verses in each case. This is the number of the Antichrist, 66. And that line of demarcation is followed by another line of demarcation comprised of verse 1 in chapter 12, followed by verses 21, 20, 19, and 18 of chapter 10, and verse 13 of chapter 10, followed by verses 14, 15, 16, and 17. Please note there is a total of 5 verses here, and a total of 5 verses here. In other words, 55, which symbolizes Mary's rosary. None of this numerology is accidental. And that is the same message our Lord gave Catholics On the day Pope Benedict resigned, when he struck the Vatican with lightning at exactly 5:55 p.m. Both Daniel and our Lord are telling us that if we Catholics want to prevent the false prophet from taking over the papacy, we must pray many rosaries. And incidentally, another YouTube subscriber asked me, does Daniel 10:4 predict the exact date when this false prophet will take over? Let's take a look at that passage. And in the 24th day of the first month, I was by the great river, which is the Tigris. Now the first month for Daniel in the Hebrew calendar was the month of Nisan. And this year, the 24th day of Nisan occurs on April 4th. Is that the day that the new Pope will be elected? Now that could be the date in which the conclave elects a new Pope this year, or it could refer to when the false prophet takes the continual sacrifice, that is the Eucharist, away from the prince, and that could be either this year or next year. In any event, the prophecies of Daniel are going to be fulfilled very soon. And as always, I do offer a free copy of my book, Revelation Unraveled. For any of you who may be interested, you can write to the address you see on your screen or send me a message to my YouTube channel.